Insights on Communication Transparency, a case study of organizational communication at Apple Incorporated. This presentation was completed by James Fleshman, Breanna Hayman, and Robyn Kaltenbach for the Scripps College of Communication at Ohio University. Class Comms 7220, Communicative Processes in Organizations. We wanted to start out with this quote because we really feel that it describes Apple and their pursuit of innovation. Steve Jobs said that innovation distinguishes between a leader and a follower. We see that throughout many of Apple's practices, and we wanted to take a moment to consider how transparency can affect their organizational communication and continue to help them be an innovative leader in the technology sphere. Let's start with an overview of Apple Incorporated. It was founded on April 1st, 1976 by Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Now, it's a multinational corporation that transcends many industries, including personal computing, music, animated movies, digital production, and more. It has truly transformed digital connectivity between consumers, between businesses, and in many of the different fields that they operate. Now, they have 130,000 employees worldwide, and they do about $267.7 billion in sales, making their current value around $1.94 trillion. These two men, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, set out together in a garage to create an innovative new computer company, and they did that through Apple Incorporated. So we want to share the mission statement because we feel it's a great jumping off point for understanding our case study. They write, Apple is committed to bringing the best personal computing experience to students, educators, creative professionals, and consumers globally through innovative hardware, software, and internet offerings. We see that Apple is committed, first and foremost, to bringing the best personal computing experience. They want to provide it to these people worldwide, and they want to be innovative, not just in one realm, but in all the things that they do, hardware, software, and internet offerings. So we see that, and we wanted to consider how Apple could even more improve their communication to better serve these consumers around the world. That's what we did through our case study, and we'll discuss first how we collected some of the data on this. We noticed first and foremost how prominent the Apple brand is within popular media. We noticed that there was articles written about it, there's YouTube videos made about it. Apple is everywhere in popular media. And so we used some of those examples to help us choose this as an organization to study and to help us consider more deeply how Apple could communicate transparently with their consumers. We also took a look at employee comments and ratings on Glassdoor.com. This allowed us to consider internal communication between employees at Apple. We wanted to see how they felt about the company and how they viewed the company in terms of internal communication. We also completed a literature search of academic databases to see how other academics had dealt with the communication challenges and successes of Apple. From a first-hand perspective, we viewed Steve Jobs and Tim Cook's presentations to see how they, from the first-hand experience, presented Apple and how they wanted to present the company. We also completed a marketing analysis to see how Apple wanted to brand themselves. Did they want to brand themselves as sustainable? Did they want to brand themselves as simple? Did they want to brand themselves as affordable? In many different ways, we viewed these marketing analyses and we used it to help us understand their communication more fully. So, the overarching communication problem that we ended up settling on was transparency. Apple must communicate transparency. They must maintain transparency with consumers while also keeping ethical, legal, and human resources standards and managing differing expectations among a large and diverse constituent base. The challenge here is that they also need to be transparent with both internal and external stakeholders, both internal employees and consumers that buy the products, and governments that regulate the production and regulate the trade, and producers that actually make the devices, including those employees. We really wanted to take a look at that. And so first we're going to see how some of these issues can arise from poor transparency with internal constituents, namely employees in North American retail stores, headquarters, distribution centers, and the like. We'll start with that, but we're really going to take a look at a myriad of ways that these ethical, legal, and human resources standards can be improved or can be kept within Apple Inc. The first issue that we wanted to take a look at is that of employee engagement. As an employer, Apple has more than 100,000 employees in many sectors across North America. Communication strategies with these stakeholders is critical. Apple has held the #1 spot on Fortune magazine's top employees for 13 years in a row. And it's not only because of their innovation and affordability of products, but also because of their employee engagement. There are a number of advantages to working at Apple. To begin, these people feel that they're part of an incredible organization that is leading the way regarding technology and innovation. Employees join Apple's team in many cases because they align with the organization's core values. In many of these positions, the creative work that they complete allows employees to exercise agency and feel that they have the opportunity to contribute in a collaborative environment with like-minded individuals. According to our research, one of the greatest advantages of working at Apple is the compensation and benefits packages. These really help to attract and retain strong employees at Apple. Unfortunately, there's also quite a bit of feedback that highlights the disadvantages and deterrents that employees have experienced working for Apple. With the responsibility of creating the next best thing before the competition comes out with it, challenging assignments and tight deadlines, demanding workloads are common. For some, these formidable expectations can be a deterrent. Because of the size of the organization, many employees find that opportunities to advance through the organization are limited, and that they're not part of the decision-making process due to the traditional organizational structure. In certain parts of the organization, the expectation of working long hours, nights, holidays, and weekends leads to the feeling that they lack a balance between their work and personal responsibilities. All of these issues can lead to stress and employee dissatisfaction, and this disconnect can lead to employee turnover and thus increased expense for the organization. So the communication issue here is how Apple should disclose the work-life balance and the demands of employment during the recruitment process. By doing so and communicating transparently about working at Apple and the expectations that it brings, they can minimize the disconnect in employee understanding of expectations. The second issue we wanted to consider is that of environmental impact. The challenges of managing a large multinational tech company that produces devices requires producing things with precious metals and minerals, mining those precious metals and minerals, and using certain chemicals and machines to create those devices. How can Apple provide transparency through their web platform to reiterate their commitment to their environmental vision? Well, currently, they showcase current initiatives via articles and photographs, things that they're doing around the world to try and have a positive environmental impact. They also communicate the funding that they use towards this environmental vision. And one of the things that Jackson, a spokesperson for Apple, said in 2014 is that we feel the responsibility to consider everything we do in order to reduce our impact on the environment. This means using greener materials and constantly inventing new ways to conserve precious resources. So as we considered this, we looked at Apple's actual practices compared with what they say they care about on their website. As far as the third issue, key issue number 3 is privacy management. Over its history, Apple has established itself in favor of consumer privacy. When we researched this, we really focused on the case of San Bernardino, Apple versus the Department of Justice. It's a great case in communication privacy management. And as we looked at this theory of privacy management, we began to see how both Apple and the FBI presented their arguments. The FBI basically wanted Apple to unlock an iPhone that was used by the shooter in San Bernardino. They wanted to see if they could get some evidence off this iPhone. Apple, on the other hand, established itself in favor of consumer privacy and in favor of that individual's right to manage their own disclosure of information by refusing to unlock the iPhone, saying that it would create a dangerous precedent for the future in terms of what they would have to do for the Department of Justice. The communication issue here is in maintaining transparency or changing their practices that could increase profits and decrease problems with the government. There's the challenge here of either maintaining transparency, which consumers often appreciate, or increasing their profits by selling information to ad companies and marketers, or decreasing problems with the government, which often requests information from Apple. The fourth issue that we considered is that of working conditions. In many of the places that Apple sources their materials and creates their devices, Apple products are produced with underpaid and slave labor, sometimes even child slave labor, in China and African countries. This picture here shows a Foxconn factory in China. And the fact of the matter is that many of these people are overworked and paid only a couple of dollars, maybe even only $1 a day for their work. This creates a challenging situation in which workers are underpaid, treated poorly, and don't have the opportunity to advance or do better in the future. While these issues have been reported on, we wanted to consider this in terms of the cognitive dissonance theory of Leon Fessinger. We think that this applies because as consumers are willing to ignore unethical practices in the production of these devices, whether it be in the mining of precious minerals in Africa by slave labor, child slave labor, or through the underpaid workers in China, consumers are willing to ignore these unethical practices because they so much want that innovation. So the challenge for Apple in dealing with this communication issue of working conditions is if they should mitigate the effects of these working conditions and how bad they really are, or if they should make changes and change the condition of these foreign work practices. Transparency on either end is important for Apple to consider, but they can only communicate transparently if they change the communication and the conditions of these foreign workplaces. The fifth issue that we wanted to consider is that of legal issues. In the European Union, Apple regularly funnels all of their income through Ireland as a tax haven. All the profits from European sales are recorded in Ireland, and Apple Sales International has to pay almost no taxes, making it incredibly profitable, only paying a 0.005% effective tax rate. Then those taxes are allocated to the head office and are often left untaxed. So the issue here is if Apple should be transparent about these tax payments. Should they increase their tax payment and show that they care about the public perception and the legal consequences? Even if this is legal, how does this change the cost to stakeholders? That should they communicate transparently about the practices and the risk? Or should they continue to keep their practices so that they can make more profit? These issues are challenging to consider, and they're things that we viewed in this case study as we considered legal and tax issues for Apple. Now, next we wanted to consider the causes. We've addressed the responsibility that Apple has regarding communicating with internal and external constituents in a transparent manner, and some of the issues that can arise from that communicative problem. The reason that this is important matter for the leaders to consider is a result of several variables. To begin, as an industry leader, innovation is at the heart of what Apple does. Innovation comes with great responsibility, and Steve Jobs is quoted as saying, "You can't ask a customer what they want and try and give it to them. By the time you get it built, they'll want something new." Transparency is particularly prudent in innovative organizations due to the theory of innovation diffusion. This theory, which was presented in 1962 by Everett Rogers, demonstrates how new ideas and technology spreads. Apple's leaders have successfully applied this theory while launching any number of products, as it is imperative to bridge into the market where the majority of consumers comfortably exist. 15 to 16% of the population, the innovators and the early adopters, seek out the newest ideas and products. These are the individuals that pre-order new gadgets or wait in line to be among the first. They are a captive population. The odds are not enough to create a profit, however, And so innovators such as Apple must communicate with the masses why those people should purchase their products. Without the next 30 to 50% of the population, a product will likely fail. Transparency in communication is critical also because of the expectancy violations theory. This theory posits that individuals go into any relationship, even a consumer relationship, with a preconception of what they will get out of that exchange. If Apple fails to meet that expectation, the consumer will be dissatisfied with their experience and product. Therefore, success rests on the condition of open and honest discourse that creates a framework for the dyad, particularly with an evolving consumer base with differing and dynamic expectations. This transparent communication establishes confidence with internal and external constituents that Apple is adhering to government regulations, to social regulations, and it can thus impact loyalty and sales in an environment where the competition is closing the gap. We'll continue on now to our recommendations. As we researched all of this and put it into our case study, we ultimately wanted to recommend to Apple's leadership some ways that they could improve their communication transparency. The first recommendation that we have is that Apple acknowledge their past mistakes and labor practices. Instead of trying to cover it up, they should bring standards up to a presentable level where workers in factories in China can be shown how that they live well and they provide for their families and they have suitable working conditions. We also think that Apple should evaluate and update employee recruitment and socialization practices to improve their internal communication. Employees should know ahead of time that they will work hard and have long, difficult hours, but that they'll also be rewarded for working hard. This transparency would help their internal communication. We also suggest that Apple acknowledge past mistakes in the sourcing of precious metals. While many of these metals have been sourced primarily from child slave mines in Africa, we think that they could start by implementing recycling methods to pull these precious metals from old devices and use them in new devices. We also think that they could implement more sustainable mining practices for the things that they still need to mine. By paying people a living wage that helps them to provide for their families, we believe that Apple can ethically begin to communicate about their mining practices. We also recommend that they take responsibility for privacy management and that they really take the front seat and form an identity as the consumer privacy brand. They have an advantage here as they are already viewed like this for many people. But if they continue to make movements that help establish their brand as a privacy management company, we believe that they can continue to increase their sales and their brand loyalty. Finally, we recommend that they implement transparent tax practices as an organization. This means that they should show their commitment to the countries in which they operate by paying fair taxes. And even though some things might be legal through a loophole, we recommend that they pay fair taxes to show their commitment to each of the countries in which they operate. We summarize this by saying that they should acknowledge their past mistakes and their past practices, they should take responsibility for them, and they should make the necessary changes to improve their transparency and communication for the future. Our projections are that if they have an increased crisis communication plan, they can see a 6% increase in their customer base and a $16.47 billion increase in net sales. Now, Apple's base grows every year, but we believe that if they deal with the crises of labor practices, if they deal with the crises of mining practices, if they deal with the crises of the internal communication in the workforce and legal practices, we believe that they can really increase their customer base and see a real true improvement in net sales. By showcasing these ethical work environments, in addition to that crisis communication plan, in addition to just having a response, we believe that if they transparently promote how they create ethical work environments, they could see a 1% increase in customer base and a 5% decrease in employee turnover, all of this saving them a significant amount of money. Finally, increased data privacy transparency could really result in an increased customer base in previously skeptical consumer areas. So as much of the market continues to move towards selling data, if Apple will work to increase data privacy, we believe that their customer base can increase, pulling from other smartphone brands. In conclusion, we really want to acknowledge that Apple has a fiercely loyal customer base, but that it can be enhanced by improving working conditions, maintaining consumer privacy, protecting the environment, and engaging employees in their decision making. Following these steps will ensure that customers feel Apple's transparency and communication, which will result in the kind of growing consumer base that they want to see. Stakeholders want to see this growing consumer base, employees want to see this growing consumer base, and even Apple's own consumers want to see the company continuing to grow, continuing to innovate so that they can always have the best device. The challenge here is to maintain transparency and communication so that they can be the best company on the market, the ethical company, the legally ethical company, the tax true company. All of these things are important for Apple in maintaining communication that is transparent, honest, and open. We believe that if Apple leaders take these recommendations into effect, that they'll see these effects. And we're excited to see how Apple can continue to innovate by their communication transparency. Thank you.